Okay, we are back to continue with part two of theater business. I hope you've already looked at one. If you have not looked at part one, go to the theater business or theater as business part one that's on the YouTube, and then come to this one. Anyways, let's pick up from where we left off. So we just got through talking about nonprofits and what a nonprofit is and how a nonprofit should behave. And these are what kind of makes a nonprofit. So we left off saying that, if someone ever invites you to be a part of a nonprofit, you first thing you want to do is check to make sure that that nonprofit has those protections in place. Because if someone says, hey, you want to help for the Lighthouse for the Blind, you can be on the board, and you're like, yeah, that sounds fun, I want to help. And then all of a sudden they say, oh, wait a minute, we had something really wrong go wrong with the organization. You're held responsible. If there's a financial issue with the organization, if they do not have board and officers insurance, you as a board member could lose a lot of your own personal assets. So that's something to take note of as we discuss this. Okay, so nonprofit versus for-profit. Remember, nonprofit, everything has to go back into the entity in order for it to do what it's supposed to do. So we've talked a little bit about structure. I'm not going to get into a whole lot of that. If you are with a fraternity or sorority, you probably handle your meetings the way nonprofits are asked to do so. Our government does it or is supposed to do it. Typically, the issue of handling meetings that way are standard, but they are standard in a way that is what should be expected in nonprofits. You would have the same structure, a president. You would have other officers like a treasurer, parliamentarian, vice president, historian, secretary, and then you would have a group of board members. Now, the president and all these officers are considered the executive committee, and their job is to help lead the board members. The board members are voting members, and they would have things put to them by the president. Typically, the president is not a voting member. They're overseeing everything. And so they have to do things in a collective way. The way that they decide on things is all done in a collective process. There is no overseeing leader who's in charge of anything. And so things like the treasurer, that person is the more assigned person in charge of the finances. A parliamentarian, someone's like the rule keeper. They make sure that all the rules and bylaws are kept up with. And then you have historian, vice president, and some of those others that come in there. Those are while they are leaders on the board, they're non-paid, and everyone is volunteer. Okay, this here is a link that I had to our organizational chart. And if we were to sneak back over to it, let me see if I can do this and still look okay. You'll notice that the board of directors is over artistic director, executive director, business manager, marketing. All of these people are typically paid staff members that answer to a group of people that are volunteer people who do not get paid. In a professional entity, this box may have a board of trustees. Maybe they're investors, or they may have, the box may just have an executive producer, a CEO, someone who is in it for the money and is financially in charge of everything. And it really just depends on the structure. This can go in a lot of different ways. But you'll notice in the structure, we have two leaders over kind of the split half of the theater. One is the executive director, who is over the finance and administrative side. You'll notice they have like the business manager, marketing, public relations, accounting, box office, things that have to do with running the business. And then the artistic director, who's usually equally yoked with an executive or managing director, and they handle all the artistic and production side. Artistic and production on one side, finance and administration on the other side. You'll see these overlapped a lot. You'll see them have different viewpoints as far as who's in charge of who, but this is typically how that goes. So when you're looking at bylaws, you're looking at building a company, and you have people involved. These are just a list of things that they have to decide upon. How the structure is going to be, like I just showed you, developing a mission statement. A mission statement is basically a statement that says this is why we exist and what we do. Creating a look or an idea of what you are, registering your company, having a bank account that's assigned strictly to the company. It can't run through someone's personal bank account. Signing up with relevant organizations that may be interested in what you do. And then, of course, deciding if you're going to proceed as a for-profit or nonprofit entity. There are also the bigger picture ideas of how you're going to keep up with things. You've got to make money, and you've got to have funds to function. Grants, donations, all that is there. That falls under what we call the unearned income category. So typically you have earned income and you have unearned income. And in those categories, earned income for a theater would be things like ticket sales, merchandise sales. If you have a concession stand and you're selling drinks and things of that nature, that's earned income. You're providing something and getting money for it. But nonprofits also, if they're a 501c3, can have what's called unearned income, and that would be things like grants from the government, donations, other sorts of private donations or endowments can come from private funding sources like families, companies, and things of that nature. In-kind donations are donations that are non-monetary, meaning it's not money, you're getting donated stuff. Like American Airlines would donate ticket vouchers to the Dallas Theater Center and say, okay, we're going to give you 6 ticket vouchers, which means these are basically plane tickets for when you need to fly in professional artists in and you don't have to pay for them. American Airlines would decide what the value of each of those are, and they would write in that as a donation, and then of course that'd be turned in with their tax process and go against any tax bill they might have for the company. So that's another big important thing, is how your company's going to make money. Then, of course, how is your process going to work? What sort of process are you going to have? Of producing shows, presenting shows, activities? Are you going to have a children's theater also? Or are you going to do educational theater? Creating a database, or more modern terms, communications. SEOs, how to reach out, social media, how are you going to reach out and communicate with the people you're going to be communicating to? How do you do that? Knowing who your audience is. If I'm in a highly family populated area, maybe I'm looking at children's theater. If I want to have a movement of a certain type of theater that focuses on diversity or something like that, then I would need to think about what my audience might be, and that way I can cater to them, so you can do things that will satisfy that audience base that you're looking at. And then you want to work backwards, because in the theater you can't open the building, get everything open, and all of a sudden you don't have something to put in there. So a lot of times working backwards means seeing where you want to be and planning backwards, so that way when you open up you actually have a rehearsed play, a rehearsed show, or something planned and brought in, so you can actually have a product to give to society. The term bylaws basically is your constitution. That's basically all the rules, which basically should have any and everything about your theater company. If I want to know anything about your company, all I have to do is look in your bylaws. Like I said, if you've been in a sorority or a fraternity, you probably have bylaws, but it should have everything about every single tidbit, from basic things, from the address all the way down to how many amendments and what they are and what should be in there. Part of the board of directors' job is, when issues come about in running the organization, they should be making changes and amendments to the bylaws. That way those issues aren't forthcoming later for future boards of directors. It's a living entity and changes over the life of its existence, because board members come and go, as opposed to a company where you may own a company and you pass it down through a family, but still the communication is done through bylaws. Okay, so that's kind of the setup of the structure of a theater business entity. It's not any different than your church, usually in structure, except for staff and things like that, or any different than any other charity, but we don't think of theaters as charities, but like a lot of arts organizations, it can fall under that category. Your ballets, your operas, your symphonies, they all typically fall under nonprofit organizations, just because on their own it's hard to maintain those businesses, because the amounts of pay have to be at a certain level, because everything's live and it's not recorded like a movie and things like that. Okay, so let's go ahead and move down to professional theater. Before we leave, I want to show you the unions. Professional theater typically has a world of unions, which are basically groups that have collective bargaining power. That means that you have a way to fight for and or vote on people who represent you and be able to get better contracts and deals with your organizations. Like teachers have unions. If they're not getting what they want, they can strike, and that's what a union can do. But let's go to the unions that we have. In professional theater, there is a stage union for actors called Actors Equity Association. And what this is this is for actors who perform on stage. Stage managers are also in this union, but these are strictly for actors who are performing on stages. They have set scales depending on how big the theater is. You're paid typically, first it's personal contract, but you're also paid on what tier level that contract is, and I won't get into that, but there's different levels. But usually it has to do with the size of theater and also how many seats are in that theater and what the ticket prices are in that theater. That can and will dictate what your pay scale may be for that. Now, if you're a featured actor who has a lot of popularity and things like that, then you can negotiate, and your contracts can be all different types of levels. So all of them can and are negotiable. SAG-AFTRA means Screen Actors Guild and American Federation of Television Radio Artists. These are all actors that are on TV, film, radio, broadcasters, and now this is everybody else. So that is in that performance side or in that industry. Every actor you know on every movie or TV show you ever saw is in SAG-AFTRA. They do have the SAG Awards, which is like the Tonys or like the Oscars. And so Actors Equity is for stage actors. SAG-AFTRA is for film, television, radio actors. So you can know the difference. IATSE is the International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees, and basically these are the backstage people for film, TV, and theater, and they are the crew members, they are the techies, the stage hands, people like that, and they do things because they're labor, and they also have this union, and if they need to have those rights for bargaining, they always have input on that so that they can be treated fairly. And that's typically what all it comes down to. SDC is for directors and choreographers. If you're a play director, you're probably a part of stage directors and choreographers. If you teach dance for musicals and professional theater, you're a choreographer that's in SDC. And this helps and empowers those directors so they can have bargaining rights for independent contracts. A lot of these folks, these like actors, they go from job to job a lot. So you may be directing a play in Montreal, and after the show is up in 4 weeks, you're picking up with a gig over in LA or something like that as a director. So you could be, most theater is on a contractual basis. You're usually not always what's called a resident artist, which means you're in, and even then you're on a contract basis. Let's say you're a resident for a year at a university or something on a professional stipend or something. So it is from job to job, and so that's what SDC is. Now there is one for professional stage designers, and those are what professional set designers would be involved in. That way when you're creating a design or you're creating something for the theater, you're protected. Your artwork is protected and you have those rights. The last thing I list here in theater business, without boring you all to death, is a list of the various jobs. So if you're looking for a career in theater and you're not sure, a career period, not just in theater, not in theater, but if you're looking for a career idea or path, don't forget the nonprofit world. And in the arts nonprofit world, you can make really good money as a business person and be in charge of a nonprofit. Theater business managers make pretty decent money, but development folks make pretty good money. Directors of development, they bring in funds and money for these nonprofits, and that's pretty cool because they can usually set their salary sometimes because they typically start out on a contract basis, and next thing you know, poof, they're bringing in a lot of money, and so that really helps them a lot. Grant writers, people who give donations and things like that. Okay, so we're coming to the end of this, so this will complete theater as a business. I'll send a follow-up note. This will complete our lectures. Wow, sorry, didn't mean to talk so fast. Okay, got to stop there, and this will be out to you really soon. Thanks.